Hello, and welcome to Bridgeford Trust Company's Delivering Direction and Control podcast series. Our podcast series is designed to educate, challenge, and inspire listeners while keeping you updated on developments regarding modern trust law and powerful planning opportunities available, all in an effort to deliver direction and control to clients and their advisors.
Hello, everybody. This is David Warren here again with another installment of our podcast series. Of course, I'm chairman of our board, co-founder of Bridgeford Trust Company, and continue to be delighted by the success of the podcast and the quality of guests that we've been able to attract over the last 2 or 3 years now. I think we're well over 50 episodes, and each of those episodes are special and insightful in their own way, as we love to talk to thought leaders and love to explore big ideas. And it's really the common theme, I think, throughout the podcast is to talk to people in our industry who are thinking about things in a big way, finding unique ways to solve problems for clients and work with high net worth families around effective tax planning and asset protection and privacy and all the things we get excited about at Bridgeford. And today is also along the lines of that paradigm. We have a thought leader that I have recently met. He's a new friend to me and Bridgeford. Became connected to an organization called Trusted Advisor, which we'll talk a little bit about because that's a phenomenal organization that brings thought leaders like Heath today and others together to focus on a particular industry, but we'll get that in a minute. But Heath is very impressive in and of himself. I mean, currently he's president of Icon Wealth and Legacy Partners, and before that he was with Sage Mark consulting and doing financial planning and part of that team, and also before that was Payne Weber. And so he has a really long, distinguished history of working with high net worth families, looking for unique solutions to issues facing really that whole demographic. So Heath, I'll let you say hello.
How you doing, David? I'm honored to be here today.
Happy to have you. And let's talk about how we met. You know, I mean, as I said, we're new friends and we're new collaborators, but really it's thanks to a network organization that we both joined. And you were a member, I think you are a member longer than I have been. So briefly, if you don't mind, describe Trusted Advisor, and I'll add to it, and then talk about how you found it. Because I think, in addition to what we're going to talk about relative to your practice, I think that this organization may be of interest to others. I plan to do an interview with the founder of the organization, but let's use this as a bit of a teaser, Heath, if you don't mind. So talk about the organization and your involvement.
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually met Matthew Hoffman when he was working with his previous company. He was rolling out a software company for affluent business owners and real estate families. Mm-hmm. I actually think he was kind of an early adopter. It didn't work as well then as it would have worked now. But it was him meeting a lot of people like yourself, myself, and next thing you know, he did launch Trusted Advisors here in LA, and I probably was one of the first members
was
to
that
join.
Right?
Yeah.
Wow, I forgot you that history you have. Yeah, Heath, Matt Hoffman is really the sort of the proverbial force of nature. What he's done with Trusted Advisor from scratch is so impressive, and you know the singular focus on supporting the entertainment industry, sports stars, actors, producers is pretty phenomenal and unique, and the growth trajectory. I mean, they have hundreds of members now, and they have, of course, chapters in LA and Nashville and Miami and New York and now London and Zurich. I mean, it is just a fantastic organization that brings so many amazing thought leaders to the table. So that's very exciting, and very exciting to be able to have it bring us together. But let's go back to focusing on you. I mean, you've had a really impressive career. So before Icon, talk to us how you got into the industry and sort of your pathway to becoming the leader of Icon.
Yeah, thank you. I actually came to LA to go to law school. I wanted to be a sports agent. Realized very quickly realized very quickly I did not like law school. So after I finished my first year, my big brother from fraternity was actually working at Smith Barney here in Beverly Hills. I went and took a job just cold calling and learning the business for the summer because I planned on going back to law school, even though I wasn't exactly in love. And at the end of the summer, one of the senior partners that I was working with looked at me and said, what are you doing on Monday? And I said, well, school starts. I appreciate everything you've done for me because you'll be here at 8 o'clock. I said, what does that mean? He says, you never loved law school anyways. I think you'll do very well in this business. And so that was in 1993. I got licensed in 1994. And like they say, the rest is history. So,
well, you and I are in total agreement. I did not like law school. I foolishly completed it and didn't enjoy practice of the law most of the time. And it took me years longer to get my sense to me and stop practicing law. So kudos to you for figuring out sooner than I did. I actually probably went into a lot more debt too. So as some say, sometimes I'm slow in the uptake. But no, but that's a fast. I mean, it's interesting though. There were a lot of lawyers or people that have been through parts of law school that jump into the industry. So when you say license, what licenses were you talking about in the early days?
Well, then I had a 7, a 63, and a 65. I guess that 63 and 65 is combined now to a 66, I believe. But I was managing money with this gentleman as my senior.
So talk to me about the trajectory. Where'd you go from there?
He actually left to go to Payne Weber, now UBS. I did join him. I then broke off from him, started to build my own practice. And I realized one thing, though. I didn't love managing money. I loved financial planning. I loved meeting with clients. I loved the tax estate planning element of it. And so that's in January of 2000, I went to take a position with SageMark Consulting in their Glendale office, division of Lincoln National Corporation, and fell in love with really working with clients in a much deeper process, multi-generational, as opposed to just managing their wealth.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. I think that's where the industry has continues to evolve. But we talk to people when we do a lot of work with asset managers, and I think people have realized that really where the magic is in the planning and solving problems for people. And well, so tell me, is SageMark still, or was it folded into completely into a different organization?
No, it's from what I understand, it's still part of Lincoln National Corporation. And at the time, one of the preeminent estate and business planning firms in the country.
Wow, excellent. Well, so from there, where did Icon happen? How did you get to Icon?
It was a longer pathway, but eventually it just got to a point where I created Icon with a previous partner. That was probably about 17, 18 years ago. And eventually we parted ways, and it's been Icon and me really working with the clients' outsourced professionals, CPA, the wealth manager, because I no longer manage money, their insurance agent, the estate planning attorney, tax attorney, whatever is necessary to be able to put together a proper plan for that family.
So you don't manage money at all anymore. It's just you do purely the planning process for folks.
And the life insurance work, yeah.
And the life insurance work. And we'll get to that. We'll get to that in a second, because I think what you're doing in the life insurance space is pretty innovative, but I want to get there slowly. So when you talk about the planning aspect of things, what's the primary focus that you're hearing from families? And I mean more so now. I mean, we're living in a chaotic world. There's so much changing every day. Something weird's coming out of Washington. So I would imagine that takes your approach to planning and really pushes you to be nimble and dynamic for your clients. So talk to me about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, things are always changing. The problem is that there's two things that don't change. The focus and drive that a successful family typically has for their money-making activities, and then their planning process. Mm-hmm. When you really look at a client, they're, as your point, it's always evolving, and they're not evolving well enough with their plan. The businesses, the wealth, whatever it is that they're using to grow their money, grow their wealth, is continuing to evolve, but the plan often lags behind. And things change in a family. Unfortunately, children die, grandchildren die, the principals eventually die, and if your plan is not current, it could cause massive problems for you and your family.
Yeah, no, for sure. Well, so you talk about the insurance piece, and I want to get into that. So what are you seeing now from a insurance planning perspective? And the reason why I say now is, although I'm not licensed and certainly don't have your expertise, I always have been a fan of insurance. And even back when I practiced law, I think it, in the right circumstances, almost all circumstances, especially for large families, there is a place for some kind of insurance. And maybe you can walk us through various aspects of what is more relevant today, perhaps, than was 20 years ago, because that evolves as well in terms of what's products are out there, what approaches are out there. But as I said, I've always been a believer in insurance in some way or another, in particular PPLI, and which we're going to get into. I think that is a phenomenal planning tool in the right circumstance. And so before we get into PPLI, talk about your journey in insurance, because as I said, that's an evolving conversation that I think you need to stay on top of and also differentiate yourself, because frankly, just like lawyers, insurance people who sell insurance sometimes are not always welcomed in the room, right? So how have you differentiated yourself?
It's a really good point. I mean, it's unfortunate. I don't know what occurred many years ago where the word insurance, or life insurance in particular, became frowned upon, but it has to a large degree. And in my opinion, is really one of the best planning tools, because if you can pay $10,000 a year to get $1 million of death benefit, that is a pretty powerful leverage. And it's not about creating more wealth for the family. It's about being able to do what the family needs to do, right? Potentially replace the principal at the firm, at the company level, the CEO, having key person insurance, having liquidity there so that the family doesn't have to consider selling the company to pay the estate tax. When I first got into this business, I think the exemption was $500,000 per person. So $1 million was free from estate taxes. The new Trump bill just made it 30 million. So the first 30 million is free from estate taxes for a married couple. I mean, that's a huge benefit for clients, kind of in that 25 to $50 million range, in terms of being able to preserve the family farm, the family business, whatever it may be. So I think that the conversations really do need to take place when it comes to insurance for liquidity purposes.
So you make a great point. So in the big beautiful bill that makes that change, it changes the place, right, of insurance. So, back when you began and back when I was practicing law, there was probably a stronger need to offset, for taxation purposes or to create liquidity for the tax play. But now there is not so much when it's that high. So that changes the conversation, as you just said. So talk to me about how it's changing the conversation, and then lead me to PPLI, because insurance, just like trusts, haven't died just because there's different changes in the threshold of taxation or gifting, or both planning tools are still remarkably relevant, just in a little bit of a different way, right? So why don't you take it from there?
Yeah, I mean, I don't suspect that if a new administration comes into power that the exemption amount will be dropped, but it very well could be. So I tell people, just because you don't need the amount of life insurance that you currently own today, if it still makes financial sense within the plan, let's just go ahead and keep it. If you can afford it, it's there, just go ahead and keep it, because things do change. Priorities change, goals and objectives change. The laws can change. So I just tell people, continue to monitor your plan every couple of years. And if something changes within that time period that you haven't got to, then readdress it. And, when it came to private placement life insurance, it was a strategy that I had never been introduced to until about 24 months ago. It'd been around for about 38, 40 years. Yeah. And when I started to realize the planning capabilities of PPLI, that's when the light bulbs really went off for me.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I was lucky to learn about it back when I was with Bank of New York Mellon before we launched Bridgeford. And it was only in the context outside of Philadelphia, a company called Philadelphia Financial taught me everything about life insurance, John in particular, or rather PPLI. And at the time, I fell in love with it. And my job at Bank of New York Mellon, of course, was to convince folks to have Bank of New York Mellon manage the money inside of the PPLI wrapper, if you will. But PPLI has evolved so much in that space. But I continue to believe, and it's funny because you say lots of people. I run into people who talk about it now as if it just invented yesterday, and it hasn't. It's been around for a long time, and it's been tested by multiple cases, multiple PLRs, and there's a couple of big seminal cases about it. So I'm not saying it's right for everybody, but in fact, we became so excited about it at Bridgeford that we have a different business line focusing on providing a LLC in South Dakota because of insurance premium tax is so much lower in that state. And again, I talked about it, although we don't sell it at Bridgeford and we don't benefit from its sale either. I just believe in it enough as a planning tool to talk about. So what is it about it that you're so excited about? And then let's transition to what you're doing with it, which is really interesting. So, but first talk about the attributes of it that you love so much.
Yeah, I mean, based on traditional life insurance. And so when you look at being able to grow something tax deferred inside the policy, potentially borrow income tax free, and have an income tax-free death benefit to the beneficiaries, there is a ton of opportunities in the planning stages to look at a family and realize that, taxes are impactful. And if you can legally manage them, there is a benefit to obviously deferring that tax.
Yep. Yeah, and so in terms of private placement, let's define what we mean when we say private placement. Not everybody that is listening and watching even knows the definition, meaning it's really not available to everybody, right? So there are some thresholds to who can participate, right? So aren't there like two aspects to two, I guess, limiting factors, right? Because do you know those off the top of your head?
Yeah, I'm not sure I know exactly what you're talking about, but I do agree with you that it is not meant for everybody. It is very case specific. And, the term that we use in the industry, although I'm not a big fan of it, is, it is meant for the high net worth who has the money to kind of put away for the rainy day and have those assets managed.
Absolutely. And that's where I was going. I mean, there's two aspects to it. There's a liquidity. A family has to have a certain balance sheet liquidity. I think it's $2 million. And then they also have to have a certain a yearly income to qualify. And the carriers are very careful about that. But really what the magic is around PPLI is not so much the insurance play, right? But about what you can put inside of it.
Correct.
And so talk to me about that.
I work with a number of carriers that have essentially open architecture. There are some assets that are not allowed to be owned inside of PPLI because they violate, certain tax requirements. But the carrier that I'm currently working with is crypto friendly. Yeah. So being able to put, cash or crypto assets into a policy, allowing them to grow tax deferred, eventually being able to access those potentially in a loan provision is pretty powerful for the families who believe that maybe something like a Bitcoin is going to continue to grow over time. And it's not an asset that they really want to see, but taking some chips off the table makes a lot of sense from a prudent financial standpoint.
Right. And I love that you hit on that. And I really want to focus in on the crypto part of it. But that was one of the limitations early on with PPLI, as I recall, was what you could actually place inside of it, right, inside the wrapper, and that is expanded and become so much more flexible. States, in fact, like South Dakota, have written very specific rules that allow it to be, when I say it, allow the policy to hold a lot of things. I mean, virtually everything that's legal. And that's a real groundbreaking aspect of it, because it isn't just about cash or a hedge fund or a closely held stock, which is sort of the traditional target for PPLI. But now we have the ability to talk about all kinds of different type we call non-traditional assets that can go inside the PPLI. And of course, the PPLI goes into the trust, and we'll talk about that in a minute from why that's important. But now, we're living in a world where cryptocurrency is not going away. There's no question that it's here to stay. And, I think finally we're seeing it being embraced by overall the industry. And I love when you and I first connected, what you were seeing and the partners you're working with. And we do have some mutual friends in the industry, actually. We didn't know that until we met people that are real geniuses in the space as well. So walk me through when you reference putting crypto inside this PPLI policy. Talk about the process and, more importantly, the benefits, because so many of our listeners I know are interested in crypto, hold crypto. Bridgeford holds lots of crypto and trust for various families around the country. So this is a very interesting topic.
Yeah. So when you take an appreciated asset already and transfer it to a PPLI policy, there is going to be recognition of tax. So you're going to have to deal with the recognition of the tax. But if you think at roughly 118,000 that the Bitcoin's going to 250, 500, or $1 million, being able to deal with that tax consequence on that initial $100,000 price point is going to be very different than trying to figure out how to deal with the tax consequences when it gets to up to $1 million per coin. Right. And most importantly, is going to be, how do we get those assets to the next generation and deal with what might be a really large estate tax problem as well.
Absolutely. Which is another magical aspect of PPLI. We talk about it and trust out of South Dakota being very similar because there's a tax plan in play. an asset protection play. Talk about that, because the crypto assets inside of PPLI it's very difficult, if not perhaps impossible, to pierce these PPLI policies for a creditor or anybody else to get at them, which I know is the theme of people that I work with that have crypto, especially large crypto concentrations. They're constantly worried about asset protection, as they should be. In some cases, they're a target, right? I mean, there's a nefarious underworld, unfortunately, still attached to crypto, but going away. But some folks who've had success in crypto worry for their safety, worry for, how to protect this stuff. So the PPLI really lends itself to that.
Yeah, very much has an asset protection and privacy standpoint to it. Excuse me. We were sponsors at the Bitcoin 2025 in Vegas in May.
Yes, that's right.
And I will tell you, the conversations are now starting to expand where people understand that they're becoming part of the system. Mm-hmm. Much to their dismay, certain clients. But, the one thing that no one was talking about at that conference was the amount of estate tax that may be due upon the transfer of those wallets to future generations. I was, we'll just, the kids will just have the codes. If you don't want to work in a compliant environment, you're probably not going to be working with Bridgeford and Icon. But if you want to be working in a compliant environment, then being able to take advantage of these different strategies now versus in the future is paramount to success.
That's really well said. And let's drill down on that a little bit. And this is not a negative connotation at all, but a lot of the crypto people, some got involved with it before it became a thing. Quite frankly, they just were interested in it intellectually because it was an alternative currency scheme. They're also of the genre of people who don't like to be regulated, who don't like to report, who are suspicious of over-reporting, over-regulation. So you make a really good point. So for those who can look at this new paradigm of a South Dakota trust and a PPLI, they get some regulation, but the benefits, though, far outweigh and outpace their concern, around the information getting into the public domain or somebody stealing their codes or that point. And then it takes it to the next level when you start talking about placing these assets inside of a dynasty trust that lives forever. Well, that solves the problem that you just said. You should theoretically be able to avoid estate tax on crypto forever if the holder of the crypto is willing to submit themselves to just a little bit of regulation, which is not always easy conversation, as you know.
Oh, I'm very well aware that I did not really know much about this crypto space until I was introduced to a couple of clients who had large positions, actually by a gentleman that you and I have in common, as we've come to find out. And I was not able to spell Bitcoin at the time. I am now able to spell Bitcoin, but I'm not able to spell Ethereum correctly because my spell check gets me on that one. But I say it somewhat tongue in cheek. I don't understand all of the different nuances and different technologies around this. What I do understand is that the carrier that I'm currently working with is crypto friendly and will allow you to own or buy whatever it may be digital assets inside a policy. So it's opened up a whole new conversation. Hey, here we are on this podcast talking about Bridgeford and Icon and PPLI.
Now you make another great point. I'm a big believer too. I mean, when I first got into it, in fact, there's a podcast on here if people are interested. I was lucky to interview some very early innovators in crypto out of Harvard and Yale, and I understood it back then. But you're making a really interesting point. I mean, I think that being able to come to a point to have this conversation now is innovative still in and of itself. And I'm interested in where I guess the conversations are coming from. I mean, I guess you just talk to families. They say they have a high position in crypto, and then you talk to them about the various options in the PPLI. So tell me, when you bring this up, what is the response? I mean, are people jumping into this in an exciting way? Are they wary of it? Like, what kind of response are you getting?
Yes, all the above. They are concerned because it's not something they've heard about. But as you and I mentioned earlier today, this is something that has been around for a while. So people do need to understand a new strategy to them. They do need to understand life insurance taxation, traditional life insurance taxation, according to the IRS regulations, to understand even where PPLI comes from. Right. It's not, some people say it's too good to be true, but if you understand what a variable universal life policy is in the traditional sense, it's not that far to reach with regards to what PPLI is. Yeah. The difference is, as you and I talked about, is that once again, the carrier that I work with currently allows for alternative assets, crypto being one of them, to be owned or purchased inside a life insurance structure.
And I'm a big believer, back to understanding crypto. I think I understand it enough, but not to the level that obviously people who are dealing in and out of it all day long. But I also am a believer that I don't need to understand how the watch works to be able to tell time, right? So we know we have an alternative asset, and it's nuanced, and even among itself. But Ethereum's different than Bitcoin, and Bitcoin is different than the next one. But we don't need to know that. What we need to know is that it's an alternative asset class that we can plan with and plan against from a taxation perspective, asset protection and privacy. And I think that's what makes what you're doing and the message you're carrying very unique. And I applaud you. And I think it's a conversation that we need to have, and our listeners need to understand that there's multiple ways to deal with crypto that isn't going away, and to pay attention to thought leaders like you and others that are taking a hard look at the asset class and figuring out how to protect it for families.
I love your watch analogy. I don't need to know how the watch is made to understand how to tell time, but I think it's more important than that. If you believe you have the right asset and it's going to continue to appreciate over time, understanding where that value can be from a planning perspective, no different than private credit or a piece of real estate or whatever it may be that you're investing in. If you think that it has tremendous growth potential, understanding the tax complications and benefits and the strategies available to you today is going to be paramount, as I mentioned before, to your planning process.
No, and I love it, and we're very similar in that we both, as I said at the beginning, we love big ideas. This is one. This fit in nicely with the kinds of things Bridgeford likes to talk about, and I like to talk about around the country and around the world. And I love that we were connected through a common organization. Discovering that we have some real legends in the industry as mutual friends is also great. And I see us doing great work together. So for those of you listening, please see and read about Heath, as his information will be attached here. And as you work with crypto, as you work with insurance, and as you have insurance needs and planning needs, keep Heath in mind. He, as I've said a couple times now, he's certainly a thought leader in our industry, and somebody with whom I'm proud to be working with going forward. So Heath, do you have anything else you like to add?
Just one moment to finish up. As you and I were sitting there that first time we ever met, with regards to who was at that table, it was obviously you, myself. There was an estate planning attorney who was doing a little bit of PPLI work. And the gentleman next to us was very interesting. If you remember, he owns a sports and entertainment memorabilia company.
I remember very well. Yes. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Some of the stories of what kind of pieces he has that he's, holding in trust for his clients was fun.
Which is not unlike crypto, quite frankly. It's just an alternative asset class, And so, Heath, what you're referring to there is he would hold. I remember the original lyrics of "Living on a Prayer" from Bon Jovi, and you and I are old enough to know what that song is and who that band is. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know. But it's a great point, because again, PPLI and modern trust law can plan around that too, just as it can around crypto. And I'm glad you remember that. And it reminds me how excited I am to be part of Trusted Advisor.
Yeah, absolutely.
So once again, this is Heath Goldman, president of ICON. Please keep him in mind as you're planning for your families. And Heath, it's a pleasure having gotten to know you, and I look forward to great things together.
It was my pleasure. Thank you, David.
Thanks again for listening to Bridgeford Trust Company's Delivering Direction and Control podcast series. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast to keep posted on when new episodes are added. And for more information, you can visit us online at bridgefordtrust.com.